Hello everyone, welcome back. You're watching Empyrion Galactic Survival episode 159. I'm Enigmas, and today we're continuing with the hover vessel we started in the last episode. The last episode we looked at the profiles that we had laid out to kind of give ourselves a guide for how things would proceed. And then we used that as an opportunity to talk about how to use those profiles, particularly how to refine them fairly quickly and easily so that you can get a better idea of how it's going to look in the finished version and make changes while it's still easy to do that. So we laid out all of these profiles, we refined them, and now we've got about 2/3 of the basics done. And we're going to take a look at those, we're going to see what's working and what's not, and then we're going to talk about what we need to do in order to prepare for the next episode. This isn't going to take a huge amount of time, I don't think, but it is going to be probably the most intricate build that I've done up to this point, and for that reason I've started using the mirror mode for this build. And I have to say, whenever I've played voxel based games where there is a mirror mode that can be used, I always get people asking me why I don't use it, and the answer is always because I just have gotten used to building without a mirror mode and I don't really feel the need to switch. The longer, more detailed answer is that every time I've tried building with a mirror mode, there's always a downside. It's never this panacea that works and solves all of the problems of building things faster. And in this case, it's basically the same. I'm going to show you here, if you are not familiar. First thing you want to do if you want to set up mirror mode is have a block from your inventory selected that you can build with. So no weapons, no tools, only something that you can build with. In this case, I've selected hardened steel. And then you have to decide where the middle point is that you want to be working from. And in this case, I want to build so that whatever I place on this side of the ship also appears on this side of the ship. So I'm going to select the middle point of the ship, or at least make sure that I know where that is. And then I press and hold the N key, and it brings up the Build Tools menu. And because we want this side-to-side mirroring, like we discussed, I will select YZ. If you haven't set up mirror mode for this session yet, in other words, you've just logged into the game, you haven't used mirror mode since you logged in, once you select the plane that you want to work with, the YZ or any of these ones, the next thing you have to do while still holding N is put your block in that middle section where you want to have that mirror plane working, and then you left click. It's not going to place the block, it's going to make this green mesh appear. Because I've already set this up in this session, all I have to do is select the plane, and you can see, based on where I selected, that's where the plane appears. And now everything that I place on this side will appear on this side. The downside to the way that this specific system is set up is, let's say I place a couple of blocks, and I'll set this up so that you can see to either side what's going on here. I place a block, and then I place a block, and I say, actually, you know what, I didn't want those blocks there. So we remove, and we remove, still over here. That to me is kind of a thing, and I would prefer, if I've set up the mirror mode, that if I remove a block while the mirror is active, that it would remove it on both sides. Because what ends up happening is I will be working on an area, and I place a bunch of blocks, and I look at it, and I decide I need to make a bunch of changes in order for this to work. So I remove a bunch of blocks, and then I have to go over to the other side and remove the blocks on that side. It's just the same as having to count blocks and duplicate them over on the other side when you're building. The one advantage that the mirror mode offers is that not every block I place is a mistake. It doesn't happen often, but sometimes I place a block and it stays there for all time. So it saves me the time of placing it over on the other side. But if I'm doing a lot of intricate detail work and making a lot of changes, going through a lot of iterations, it's kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other. That having been said, if you haven't tried it and you want to try it, give it a shot. If you don't like it, you can just turn it off. It's not a big deal. I've got these profiles that we set up in the last episode. The first, or one of the first that we looked at, was the orange profile, which was the layout for these legs, the front profile for these legs. And the finished profile that I came up with for the inner curve was this specific shape right here. This is an exact duplicate of that shape that we've used around the whole ship, all of the inside legs. It's very, very difficult to be more accurate than exact. So when we're talking about an exact duplicate, it's good, especially when I was happy with this shape. Quite happy with it to begin with. Very simple, straightforward, but very convincing in the round category. And then the other side here, it was also a curve, kind of starting here and coming around like this. This was about the midpoint, and then a longer curve down this side. So it was an asymmetrical curve. Wasn't really too difficult to kind of get the basics in place, but it's not quite exactly where I would like it to be. One of the things that I added to help was this bumped out section here. And you can see when we start up here and we bring it around and we just follow the high points on the curve, this actually really helps to sell that idea that this top section is indeed a curve, whereas previously it was just flat and you had to really kind of stretch the imagination to pretend that it was going around like that. For the same reason, I want to create a raised section right around in here so that it comes out about a half a block worth, and again it sort of helps to sell that idea of a curve on this longer section. I'm not going to worry about that immediately because we're going to start working on the top. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but it's one of those things that I've got on the list. The one area that really is not working for me right now specifically is this area right here, at least on these front legs, and you can see why. There's all kinds of weird sort of aberrations. We've got even, this is just like flat like that, not quite working as well as I would like it to. But again, I want to focus on the top half, so we're going to leave this, we're going to come back to it, we're going to make some revisions, and we're going to keep working it until we get it to the point where we're happy with. But this is an example of how we can spend literally an hour in a particular area just tweaking and revising and still have a section that we're not happy with. Doesn't mean that we're doing it wrong, it just means we've got a few things right and we've got a few things that we still need to work on. The other profile in this lower section that we had was the yellow profile that was basically this arch right here. I haven't duplicated it block for block, but I have got it set up in a way that I'm quite happy with the way that it looks with this specific arch. It's the right shape, it's uniform, it doesn't look lopsided, it doesn't look like it's not an oval, kind of half an oval sort of shape. It just worked out, and it worked out without too much effort, so I was happy about that because it just sort of came together. That leaves us with these two profiles here that are basically the top and bottom of the main hull section. We've got what was the blue profile here, goes around the other side and then comes underneath, and the red profile, the torpedo, like here, and then it had like sort of a little bit of a tip, and then it came back and under, and the shadow actually kind of tricks me into thinking for a second that it's still there, but it got swallowed up by the lower hull. Those are the two profiles that we'll be working with that are going to be taking probably most of the time between now and the next episode. And the whole idea that I'm aiming for is to have this upper section of the ship have sort of a flat dome kind of feel to it. It doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to be perfectly oval. It just has to sell the idea that this is sort of a rounded sort of shape on the top of the ship. And in order to do that, the easiest way that I can think up to do that is to work in layers. And I've talked about this in the past, about creating complex three-dimensional shapes by working in layers. And if we start on this top layer here, this is basically the highest point on the ship, and we just start doing ovals coming from here around to this top layer here, and then around to here, and then around to that one over on the other side, and then this way. That's a pretty convincing oval. And if we can sort of duplicate that around with cubes and then just move on to the next layer and do the same thing starting here, the second layer down, come around, and then like that, oops, I missed, and then like that. You get the idea, and just keep working until we've gone through all of the layers. We've got all of the different oval shapes, and then we can decide, do we want to stick with the ovals and try and smooth them off on the edges and just kind of keep the layers, but at the same time also keep the shape of the oval? If that doesn't make too much sense to you, just think in terms of filling in this top oval here so that it's not just an outline, it's an actual flat disc, oval shaped disc. And then stack that on top of the flat oval shaped disc that we've got here, and then stack that on top of the one below and the one below, and you've still got these cube edges that you have to go around. And the question is, do you want to use those edges and refine them, smooth them off to give you a more natural sort of shape transitioning through the different layers? Or do you want to go with a different shape entirely and still have that whole idea of something that's starting on the top and sort of spreading and getting wider as it's going down? If that still doesn't make sense, just come back for the next episode and it'll be a little bit more clear. The whole idea, and the reason why I've decided to stop sort of tweaking on the lower section of the ship, is once I've got all of these different oval shapes in place and I've decided the final shape that I want them to be, I'm going to have to do the transitions from this top half of the ship to these areas that I've already done. And if you look at this area here, if you imagine this oval that starts here and comes around to there, already you can see we've got this great big section here that's going to be sticking out from underneath. And we have to figure out what we're going to do with that, whether we're going to push it back and try and merge a little bit more closely with, say, this area here. All kinds of different things we can do, but continuing to work in this area and tweak and adjust and finally get everything exactly the way we want, and then do this top section and find out that we have to redo all of it anyways because we need to make that transition, that would suck. So that's why I've decided to hold off. So the next episode, very simply, is going to be hopefully complete with this top section and the transition. We'll be able to look at those in detail, and then we can talk about some of the finer details that we'll be working on that are probably going to be taking just as much time as the initial layout. In the hopes of creating a ship that's more than just a different hull design, I want to do some interesting things that sort of take it to the next level in terms of the appearance when you're scooting around in it. And I guess a ship this size, a hover vessel this size, there's no scooting, there's roaring, I guess would be a better word. You get the idea. So if you want to be notified about the next episode, the easiest way to do that is to subscribe to my channel or follow me on social media. Links for social media are always in the information section below the video. Feel free to leave your comments and feedback. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.